Number 5, the Bears need to find a replacement for Eddie Jackson at safety. At the end of the season, he was not very good.
No.
I think the writing's on the wall that the Bears are going to be looking to improve on that spot. Everywhere else in the secondary, young blood, young guys who are improving. I think Eddie Jackson's spot will be addressed. I'm going to put that at number 5.
I like that. I think everyone saw the cryptic Instagram posts and tweets and all that stuff, and I think it is pretty much official at this point that he will no longer be a Bear.
Top 5 storylines for the Bears here in the offseason. Number 4 will be the new offense under Shane Waldron. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation about, like, do these pieces fit? Do they go after this guy because he'll fit in Shane Waldron's system? And then once we get past the free agency period and the draft, obviously in the summer, a lot of the eyeballs when we head to training camp will be looking at how this new offense is coming along. So I'm going to put the new offense with Shane Waldron as number 4.
All right, I'm interested to hear the first 3 then, because I would actually bump that up a little bit.
Ooh, number 3, an upgrade at center. I think the offensive line is pretty good. I think all things considering, I think you got 4 pieces you can use and work with on the offensive line, but you absolutely have to upgrade at center.
I think especially if you bring in a rookie quarterback as well, having a center that is trustworthy and that you're not doing gymnastics to grab a snap is paramount.
I mean, it's not all Justin Fields' fault. Think back to all the different times where the shotgun snap was botched because of whoever was in there.
Right.
Which, injuries, non-injuries, the starter, backup, whoever it was, there was always an issue with the center quarterback exchange. Number 2, top 5 Bears storylines in the offseason. This is probably where the most intrigue will be since we are mostly Bears fans listening to the station. I think we all understand where this offseason is heading. But number 2, I think, is important. The Bears need to find an edge rusher to be on the opposite side for Montez Sweat. We saw the difference that Sweat made the moment that Ryan Poles traded for him. If the Bears can find someone else to be that guy on the other side, this will be a top 5 defense in the National Football League next season, and it will be a defense that could carry a team into the playoffs, if not farther. So I think getting another edge rusher, finding that second piece to be on the other side for Montez Sweat, I think that is my number 2 storyline.
I like that because the edge rusher is something that we talked about it last year when there was the conversation of the Bears potentially trading back. Can you find a way to get Will Anderson? And he goes out and wins Defensive Rookie of the Year, finding that edge presence. You went out, you got Montez Sweat this past year at the trade deadline, and now it's going to be, I think it gets addressed for sure. It's just a matter of where it gets addressed. Is it going to be free agency? Is it going to be in the draft? Maybe there's a trade somewhere. I don't know, but it's something that I definitely think Ryan Poles needs to upgrade at some point because all these great teams, they've got to.
And if you look at it, I'm primarily pointing to that 9th pick that the Bears have, their own selection in the first round. Is that the spot? You're right. In free agency, do they address it? Or do they use that 9th pick to someone like Dallas Turner fall to them? Whoever might be available at that spot, is that where Ryan Poles goes and addresses that position? Because if you go back to last year, passing on Carter and then moving back to select right, Carter had a great year. He's a disruptor on the defensive line. He's not an edge rusher, but an interior defensive lineman. So perhaps knowing that you're going to have the 2 picks again this year, maybe you use one of those picks for the edge rusher when you get to 9 at the top of the draft. And the number 1 Bears storyline in the offseason, this is not meant to be a hot take or something that was supposed to surprise you. We all know the number 1 storyline in the offseason. It will be the trade of Justin Fields and or drafting Caleb Williams or whatever the Bears do to decide to do with that number 1 pick. If they decide to trade out of that number 1 pick and keep Justin Fields, that's the number 1 storyline of the offseason.
That's not just the number 1 Bears storyline. That's the number 1 NFL storyline of the offseason because it is fascinating and the way that it's going to impact so many things across the league. Notably, where does Justin Fields end up? And then who does that maybe take off of certain draft boards? And how does the quarterback draft then go? Justin Fields kind of holds the keys to the NFL offseason. because he is going to cause a monster domino effect. We talked about it a little bit during crosstalk with Waddle and Sylvie, but I do think it happens sooner rather than later, because that's probably going to be the first pivotal move that we see get made, because you could agree to terms on a trade like that before we get to the official league year.
You called it, Tyler. It's essentially the Super Bowl preview was the big story this weekend. Every secondary conversation was, what will the Bears do at number one? Will they trade Justin Fields?
Yes.
So for us here, that is the number one storyline as we head into this offseason. Is there anything that I missed that perhaps should be in the top five?
The only other one that I could think of that came to mind is, or actually, I've got two other ones. Do you get a long-term deal done with Jalen Johnson? And then how are you going to address your second wide receiver? What's going to happen with Darnell Mooney? Are you going to go out and draft a guy? Are you going to be in the market for maybe a T. Higgins or a Mike Evans or some sort of veteran receiver on the free agency market? Because sure, it's been nice to have DJ Moore, but he needs someone along him as well. You see every single great offense these days, they've got two significant pass catching options, and upgrading that second receiver, because right now, if the offseason were to start today, your number two guy is Tyler Scott. And that needs a significant upgrade right now.
You know, it's not like the number one needs it, the quarterback, whoever that is, whether it's a rookie or it's Justin Fields. Justin Fields needs that. So if you're planning on building around Justin Fields, not using that number one pick on a quarterback, he absolutely needs an upgrade for the second position at wide receiver. You know, because you're right. DJ Moore was fantastic. What a year for his first year in a Bears uniform. He's great, and I only think he's going to get better as he kind of develops in his own career path. But clearly they need help at the wide receiver position. The long-term deal with Jalen Johnson, I kind of view it as, I think it's just going to happen, and I'm not really worried about it. You're right. It is going to be a big storyline when and if the Bears do extend and come to an agreement on a long-term deal with Jalen Johnson. He's been one of the best corners in all of football the last couple of seasons, so he's deserving of it. I kind of bake that into something that I just assume that he's going to be back in the mix for a while.
I think he'll be back in the mix no matter what, but it comes down to, is he going to be getting a contract or is he going to be franchise tagged? And what is that number if he does get the contract? Because if he doesn't get the contract and he is franchise tagged and they don't come to some sort of long-term agreement there, then we get into the whole holdout potentially in training camp and what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and you never know. Sometimes that type of thing, even though guys in the locker room say they understand the business, sometimes that stuff sours a training camp. And
Well,
it
especially with
sours like
so many young guys too, and you're building in the right direction, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
And it sours some of the vibe heading into a season where, like, let's call it what it was. The start of last season was an absolute disaster for the Chicago Bears. The way, when we were all covering training camp, the conversation was competing last year.
Yeah.
So I do understand they finished 7-10. Theoretically, you were competing at a different level than you did the year before. But the vibes that I picked up on when we were up at Hallis Hall for training camp was not that this team was just hoping to get to 500. They were hoping to really make noise and be like one of the surprise teams in the NFC and the entire league.